Hi, I'm Mick Guzauski. I've been mixing records since Fred Flintstone has been working at Slate Gravel Company. I started out professionally with Chuck Mangione back in '75, Earth, Wind & Fire in the early '80s, some work with Prince, Stanley Clarke, George Duke, Dionne Warwick, Mr. Mister, and quite a few others. Did the new Daft Punk album, all the live tracking, mostly the live instruments on it, and the mix and the final mix. It's both easier and more time consuming now, I feel, because there's so much more you can do, and a lot fewer decisions have been made in general on newer projects than on older projects. When we had 24 tracks, if there was a lot of musical information, a lot of decisions would have to be made before I'd get the multi-track, background vocals being comped, all choices being made in the vocal and rhythm. Things were pretty much, mixes were much quicker then because it was so much was done. Now very few decisions have been made and might have 200 tracks. And I'm not saying that about every project. Some are more concise and decisions have been made, but just in general, it takes longer to mix a record now. Recently, I've been mixing in the box more than not. It's a matter of convenience, a matter of budget, a matter of that pretty much the industry standard is Pro Tools, and I'd say 90% of the time I get a Pro Tools session to work on, and the other times it's usually just consolidated tracks that I just put in a Pro Tools session. I do like to work on an analog console. Sometimes we did that on the Daft Punk record using analog outboard gear. It has a different characteristic, and I think you're using a large format console and everything being there, I think you're a little more connected to the music then. But for most part, I've been working in the box. If the budgets are bigger or the client wants, I'll go to a studio. As far as analog outboard gear, I don't know if you see it in the picture, but I have Bricasti reverb, well, it's digital, but using some outboard reverbs. I have an old Eventide 2016 AMS, RMX 16, TC6000. I have Manley EQ, GML EQ, Manley Varimute compressor. I have a GML compressor, which is out being fixed. And if something is pretty straight ahead and the client's going to be here and I don't have to do a lot of recalls, I'll use some more analog outboard gear. If it's something that I have to do myself and then somebody sends me notes, and I'll try to deal mostly with plugins for the recallability. And the plugins lately are just getting so good that there's not much of a I wouldn't say there's a detriment to using it. I'd say there's probably a little different character of using a piece of gear with tubes and transformers, and but for the most part, plugins really do the job well. I use many different brands of plugins for different things, different effects. I use Sonnox plugins. I love these for anything I want really clean, transparent, not sounding processed. The suppressor, I usually don't use that for de-essing, but what I do use it for very often is, especially on female vocals, if there's a frequency, usually occurs between 2K and 4K, that can get out of perspective with the rest of the range when the singer is singing louder. And that frequency, that area, you want either flat or maybe boosted a bit when she's singing softer. Suppressor is really good for that. You can just set the extent of the region, the steepness of the slope outside the region, and adjust the threshold and ratio to just dynamically control that, so the vocal will always sound smooth, so it won't have any kind of piercing quality when the singer sings louder. In the days before having automation and in the analog days, a lot of times if there was too much cymbal leakage in the tom tracks on a drum kit, I'd put them through de-essers, DVX 902s actually. And the DVX was a floating threshold compressor, so it would not, or de-esser, so it wouldn't reduce the high frequencies with the presence of a loud low frequency. But if there was not much low frequencies, it would just take it right out. So it would take the cymbals out of the tom, but as soon as the toms hit, the full frequency range would be there. So I should probably, if I end up with that kind of situation, I should see how this works. I like the Oxford compressor at a fairly low ratio, 1.5 to 2, and I can use quite a bit of compression at that soft knee just to give a little dynamic control, and then sometimes hit something a little more aggressive with a little more of a compressor kind of character after it. But it keeps things in a range that I want to work with before really dealing with something that changes the sound of it, really. The EQ, very, very clean, very transparent. You can go pretty hard with the high end. You up around 15, 16, 18K, and get a lot of nice air, and it doesn't really sound EQ. That's one thing I really like about this EQ. And also the low end too, it just sounds right. Pro Tools 11, I use that in the majority of cases right now. This is 10 that's up here right now, but and the reason that's up is because there's some plugins in this particular session that don't exist for 11 and probably never will. It's an older session. I've just recalled something that was did last year. I use Pro Tools 11 all the time now. I think it's more stable. The automation is far superior. For instance, if you're writing a vocal in Pro Tools 10 with a control surface, and there's like a word that's just a fraction of a beat, you move the fader for it, it's usually late. And 11, it was just so much fun doing that on 11 because it responds great. Metering's much nicer on Pro Tools 11. Yeah, the whole system just seems a lot more stable with it. One thing I've sort of find on AAX that I've never had a problem with is switching the same plugin from native to DSP. They're just much better at acting the same. Some plugins were fine between RTAS and TDM, some weren't. So you really couldn't switch modes. On AAX, it seems like they must have a standard or a tighter spec, but now you can easily switch without any problem. If you're using a DSP plugin and then you have it on a track that you're going to put in record or something, or a native plugin, and you put it on a track that it's going to be in record, if you're on an HDX system, that plugin will bypass. So if it's a plugin you can switch to DSP, do it. Having almost everything in native and DSP gives you so much power. I mean, with a modern computer, the CPU will probably do more like what several HDX cards will do. But it's just very nice to have the mixer in the HDX card. Latency is lower, and then you have all the power of the processor during mixing for plugins. Yeah, I've never really had problems with getting enough instances of plugins with this computer. It's my overclocked Hackintosh. HDX, a 6-core i7 running at 4.4 gigahertz and two UAD cards in here. So it's enough.